we're going anyway. We are live um, on this show, which I'll have to retitle later because I'm pretty sure I said the default. Um, anyway, good evening, everybody. This is our second episode of Montage et Trois with Moire. It's your favorite time of the month, at least it's ours. Um, that joke has not died yet, but
I'm
it will soon.
I'm not touching that one, Devin.
No,
Not
fair
touching
enough.
it.
Um, so this is a show where we review movies in a very irreverent tone, flying by the seat of our pants. Um, and June is Pride Month, so we figured that we do a Pride-themed episode. And instead of going for the usual types of films that you would normally cover for this month, we decided to really dig up some underrated films or some overlooked films, or rather controversial ones even, uh, that relate to this community. And who better to introduce it to you than a couple of cishet white guys? My name is Devin King, and joining me tonight is the ever eloquent, ever belligerent Stephen Beeson.
Well, I mean, I'm definitely cis. I don't know. I'll say that much. I
Sissy.
mean, my my girlfriend is trans, so I think I have a little bit of a
Oh
pass,
yes.
I guess. So
Will she be joining us tonight for the latter episode?
no, unfortunately not. Although I will say she recommended one of the films that we'll be discussing tonight,
Yeah.
which I'm anxious to get into because I had literally never heard of this film, and it is quite an experience. I'll,
Mhm.
I'll leave it at that.
Well, I would love to hear her thoughts on it if she's interested in chiming in. Unfortunately, we do not have Daryl Ailes with us tonight. My man has been busting his balls, breaking his back, working on several projects, which we are not at liberty to discuss just yet, but it's very exciting stuff, and he's just been
We're gonna
hard.
be a couple of those douchebags who are, we've got big things in the works.
We do though, we really do, and
We really do.
but Daryl's been just like going through a whole lot, and he's working away on projects that we're related in and other ones that we're not related in, and he's just been working around the clock, and he just hadn't had time to do this episode tonight. So Godspeed, you
Yes,
Black Emperor.
yes,
It's a band,
absolutely.
but yeah, uh, good on him. Shout out to him. Um, but yeah, we this episode is fashionably late as usual with us, just with our very erratic schedules. Um, just getting in this last minute.
We snuck it in before July.
We snuck it
I
in
think
before the end
that's
of Pride
what
Month.
counts.
It's like this
Yeah.
is like the people that sell pumpkins on Halloween, you know. It's just instead of doing it at the beginning of the month before the end of the month, it was just
Yeah,
like
actually, my girlfriend is right here. So let me hold on just a second. She's getting ready. Just hold on.
okay, we're finally
But
coerced
yeah,
her into it.
she'll
Well,
join us for
yeah.
at least part of this. It's actually funny. She did watch all of the films.
Oh,
This
I would love to hear her
this
thoughts on it. Then we'll just push. This is the power of bullying and coercion.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yes.
peer pressure
It,
into it.
I mean, peer pressure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, we've got three very gay films to talk about
We
tonight.
originally had a pitch for an episode called "Be Gay, Do Crime," or we may have switched those around: "Be Crime, Do Gay."
Well, and it's funny because we did want to do. There's a Fassbinder film called Querelle that our good friend Aaron Kramers of Nova Scotia, or I guess not Nova Scotia anymore, but he's been kind of pitching for a while. We were going to talk about that one. Unfortunately, I know he's been kind of going through some stuff lately and wasn't able to participate. So we kind of did some last minute
Oh yeah,
switching around.
we
But I will say, if you're listening to this, buddy, we love you. We're pulling for you. We hope you get through this, and we're
mhm.
going to talk about Querelle sooner than later.
Oh yeah,
So
we wanted you to be part of the show to talk about that film, and either way, I had to get our 30% mandated Canadian content in, which is where the Hanging Garden comes into play. Um,
yeah, this was another one. So this was another one that I had not seen at all whatsoever. I had never even heard of it.
these
Um,
films are completely under the radar, and we wonder why our viewership of the show is just nil outside of the Discord group. Just
oh yeah,
But
Well,
honestly,
without
there's no like video reviews of the Hanging. Well, we'll get into all that later. But yeah, just to kick us off, we have a film that I know you have been dying to talk about for quite some time.
yes, oh my God. And before I introduce it, I will introduce my girlfriend. This is Sylvia Moore. Say hi, Sylvia.
Hi, Sylvia.
Oh my God.
Bl Blink
She is
twice if you're
here.
being held against your will.
Well, she is a producer in her own right. She's been helping me out with the crowdfunding and some stuff that we are again not at liberty to talk about yet. But I'm sure you will be seeing and hearing more of her in the future, and we'll just kind of leave it at that. She's a business graduate. She's got all kinds of film knowledge, and we're happy to have her. So
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being
absolutely.
here. We had to have a third person in somehow, so appreciate the
Yeah,
last
well,
minute addition.
and someone with maybe some more experience in this kind of stuff than us.
Some letters of the alphabet.
Exactly.
Exactly. We had to get at least one of the alphabet people in here, so
Yeah.
we're very happy to have you.
Alphabet Mafia.
Well, I'm T and I, so
There you go. There
yeah.
you go. Okay.
That's funny. I'm a
Um.
fan of TNA.
Oh,
Anyway, without further ado, before Devin gets canceled, um, we're going to be talking about William Friedkin's Cruising. We're going to open the episode with that one. It is a 1980 crime procedural drama. So, kind of some background, which I do want to say this because I have been talking about this film. This is a blast from the past, okay? Do you remember whenever we first started the podcast, one of the very first episodes that I came on and did? We did Paul Schrader's Hardcore, we did The Nice Guys, and we did The Adjuster.
Yes, I
Okay.
remember that all too well.
Okay. That was one of the first times that I mentioned this film, and I have not shut up about it ever since. So
This has been a long time coming just to
this
get
has
you to
been a
shut the
long
fuck
time
up.
coming. um, so Cruising was inspired by real life murders that happened in New York. This was actually a story that was very close to Friedkin during the filming of The Exorcist, which we did talk about on the podcast. Um, Friedkin hired someone who was more experienced and could actually like convincingly portray a lot of the medical procedures that they were doing on the Linda Blair character of Reagan. And he was a heart not surgeon, but someone who had experience in that field and could convincingly portray these very complex sort of procedures. And his stipulation for being a part of the film and for helping out was that he wanted to be on screen because he was actually a gay man himself. He was very raised in a very kind of Christian, conservative, like evangelical kind of household. His parents were very bigoted and held some very deeply, you know, problematic. Yes, there's the buzzword of the hour.
We need to have a problematic counter every.
Yeah, right. Beliefs, and this was kind of going to be his like middle finger, because as we've talked about before, I mean, The Exorcist it wasn't marketed as a film; it was marketed as going to experience the devil in theaters, and so he was kind of like jumping at the chance to be a part of this. And years later, after the film had come out, he was actually accused of murdering a film critic. Funny enough. So these were real life murders. This person who was very close to the production of one of Friedkin's last films may or may not have been the culprit, and this was kind of William Friedkin's way of processing that, of kind of working through that. There was a book that kind of detailed it, and the film kind of borrows from all of those different elements. Friedkin talks about that he was actually friends with a mob boss who owned one of these gay leather bars back in the 80s and 90s, and wound up hitting him up and was like, "Hey, can we shoot a movie here?" And so that was how cruising came to be. And I, I think it's a fascinating film. It is a favorite of directors like Nicholas Winding Refn, Quentin Tarantino. The Safdie brothers actually homaged it in the poster for Uncut Gems.
Oh yeah, I
So
noticed that. I was looking at that and I'm like, did they rip off Uncut Gems? And then I realized, wait a minute, this
yeah,
came out first. Duh.
It, this film is also a favorite of director Steven Beeson.
oh yes, very
Yeah, he
very
just,
funny.
yeah, he just won't shut up about it.
Exactly.
But no,
No, he won't.
this is really interesting. I was watching a video saying how William Friedkin had like rejected adapting it for years after being offered several times, and well, I mean that news came to light about someone he had worked with in those killings that he suddenly became inspired or found a way that
Well,
he wanted to approach it, right?
and I yes, and I think you also have to remember that Friedkin was kind of having like a crisis of identity at the time of the release, because he did The French Connection, then he did The Exorcist, and then he follows up The Exorcist with Sorcerer, which we haven't talked about yet. Sorcerer is a phenomenal film, but it was released the same year as Star Wars: A New Hope, and it's a very nihilistic, you know, brutal film that was just not what people were in the market for, and it did not do well. It was like, you know, Friedkin did Sorcerer, Scorsese did, you know, New York, New York, and gosh, you know, Michael Cimino's Heaven's Gate, which wound up bankrupting United Artists. So really, like this was like, with the exception of like Apocalypse Now, this was the death of auteur filmmaking. Like as soon as the 80s came in, you know, with those kind of rare exceptions, like Cruising and, you know, to some extent, I mean, some of the Cronenberg stuff and, you know, Craven, and I mean, you get into horror, but like with those rare exceptions, the 80s was so much more about kind of like mainstream lowest common denominator. This was like the last bastion of that era of like, fuck it, let's make these weird out there, you know, independent minded, you know, auteur films. Um and so I'm curious to hear your thoughts about it.
Yeah, well, I just found it really interesting, like finding the history of it. I was watching the film, it just more or less felt like just a police procedural that just happens to tap into like this gay underground, and I wasn't sure what angle the film was taking and how it presented these things. Like, I guess it was just very in the vein in the zeitgeist at the time. Although I know the film had a lot of problems in production from research, is that there were people in the gay community who were outright planning to try to sabotage it, which led to issues with audio. Which I noticed that there was a lot of like dubbing that was just very obvious, and I'm wondering what had happened. Apparently, during production, people were intentionally like trying to sabotage production and create possible in the background. And
Well, I think, you know, I think this was, I think there were people who were looking at this from the perspective of like, this is demonizing the queer community. I think that's where a lot of people's minds were, because, you know, you have to understand, like, I think the murders were still fresh whenever this came out. Like, it was fresh on people's mind, and
right,
there were probably people who thought, yeah, this is in bad taste. I don't know how close this was. Like, this was 1980, so I don't know if really the AIDS epidemic had come out yet, but I think it was like right in that era where people were like super conscious of that kind of stuff. And I think that like I honestly think a lot of people just misunderstood what this film was about.
I'm really curious, like, what your thoughts on that are, because I shared an article, and this is even a more recent one from Collider, saying that this is a film that's kind of went under the radar and is forgotten, and it deserves to be. Um, which I don't know what I think about that, but it's saying that even the film today is considered hurtful. But y- y- but I know that you were saying that I think that this film is very misunderstood, so I'm very curious what your thoughts are on that.
Well, the AIDS epidemic started in 1981, so that was the year after this film was released.
Okay.
Okay.
So that it's really
So
interesting. I wonder if this film could almost be seen as not exactly foreshadowing, but it's just interesting how it was just right before this film came, or right after.
yeah, well, to me, I think you almost have to look at this through the lens of kind of like I was talking about, like that last bastion of that kind of like independent, auteur-minded kind of cinema. And I feel like, to me, I think the reason, like, I don't think Friedkin is approaching the material from some kind of like homophobic standpoint. But I think that Al Pacino's character is someone who is possibly closeted himself and obviously holds some very like straight laced kind of conservative ideas. And
Hmm.
I think the reason that the film is the way that it is because we're seeing it through the eyes of Al Pacino. And I think it comes across as exploitive because we're literally seeing it through this character's eyes. In a way, Pacino is the eyes of the audience. And yeah, I mean, it's, or think about any straight laced cop on the beat, and he's walking into a club and he's seeing people bent over a pinball machine getting
True.
fisted, right? Like that's a little bit out of the average thing that you might see. And I think,
For you.
well,
It's just a
but
normal Tuesday. What are you talking about?
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
this is just Tuesday for them, right? But so I don't know if it's so much that the film itself is taking that stance as much as it is Pacino's character. And I think Pacino is someone who, in my opinion, he's uncomfortable with himself. And he's kind of projecting that onto these people who, for all intents and purposes, are just living their lives.
True.
And it is out of this, it is out of the norm of what we would, see in our day to day, but they are like consenting adults. And so I think, to me, it's almost through that like Martin Scorsese Taxi Driver, kind of lens of like, this is the eyes of the character, right?
True.
Scorsese faced that too, where he's like, the film is accused of being racist. Well, it's not racist. Travis Bickle is racist.
Right. The
And I think
character.
that, right. And
I
it's the quintessential character study. So I
hmm.
think that's my interpretation of it.
No, I think the film is more or less neutral on it, but maybe it's undecided about what stance to take. Like I've seen some criticisms where people are saying the film is sort of timid on making a statement on it, and it is sort of viewing it through the eyes of the main character. Positive is faced with these things that he just hasn't questioned in himself, and he's just trying to keep this very stern, stoic kind of face through it. And it's interesting how there's this gay killer who uses a steak knife, because it is almost like metaphorical for the fear of penetration. you
Yeah,
know,
no, I mean, very very much so. Right. I mean, and that's been kind of a
and it's
what is the
just
word I'm
like
like?
I just ought to say it's not gay to enjoy prostate simulation.
No, absolutely not. Come on, not that there's anything wrong with that. Come on.
God put it there for a reason. No,
Exactly.
The
but
cum button's in the butt.
Exactly.
it's
Exactly.
yeah. I remember working with like a digital camera that would have like a battery component in the back, and it was called the quick release button. And I'm like, yep, I have the
Oh,
same one.
God. Yeah.
But
No, but
but no, I do think it's really interesting how this film sort of predates a lot of issues that would come up, and I think it does, in a sense, sort of capture the general attitude and fear of
I don't
and
and
apprehension
see.
of the time. But I do think the film itself is neutral on it, but it does capture kind of
See,
what the
I
cultural
don't know
attitude
if it's
was.
okay. See, I don't know if it's neutral as much as it is just kind of matter of fact. I think there's a difference. I think it is just presenting it as is. I don't think it's doing so. What I guess what I'm trying to say is, I think it might be neutral, but I don't think it's indifferent.
I was gonna say there's a video essay I was watching about that. I think that's claiming the film is indifferent, or the dangers of that, from
See,
macabre storytelling.
I feel that it is indifferent. It's not saying that all queer and gay people are into leather and S&M. I mean, present company excluded, but there's just not enough good representation out there that this is what most people are
True.
whenever they think of gay films. It's stuff like Cruising, The Crying Game, stuff along that nature.
I will say this film has aged a bit better than the bad the main baddie in Ace Ventura. Maybe not the
Oh,
best idea for
absolutely.
trans representation.
Well, yeah, Ace Ventura, the first one, I mean, that really did a big hit to the trans community. I mean, at that time, trans acceptance was actually kind of going up, but then that came out and it just reduced us to what we were before. And the whole
A
thing of
punchline.
a punchline and the whole thing of him throwing up and
Yeah,
yes, that's a story for another time.
true.
Well, and I
I do
think
still quote that movie, mostly Jim Carrey, but not the Captain Wink bit.
yes.
Well, I mean, I think I think as far I think this film has its heart in the right place. I think that might be a fair way of looking at it. I think no, I mean seriously though. I mean you're talking about, Ace Ventura. I mean Brian De Palma's Dress to Kill, which
Oh,
I
yes.
and see I love the technicality of that film. I love the way that it's shot. I love the way that it's directed. My God, it is aged like milk in pretty much every other way. Um, but it's but but I think Cruising, and maybe there is something to be said for, Friedkin, as good as this film is from a technical standpoint. Maybe it would have benefited from being directed by someone with a more experience in this community. I will say, though, um, to the film's credit, when I've seen people interviewed like Nicholas Winding Refn or Quentin Tarantino or sort of contemporary fans of the movie that are in the film industry, they have talked about that while the film usually doesn't get a reaction out of like straight, cis, whatever people, when they play it for a crowd of gay people, the crowd goes fucking wild. There's an element of camp to this film that I think the community now has kind of come around to. And Sleepaway Camp comes to mind in that regard
Yes.
too.
I love I just saw that movie for the first time this month, and it's pure camp and literally at a camp. So,
It's
but I fucking loved it. Absolutely.
so I think I almost feel comfortable giving Cruising a pass. I mean, like I think it's fucking phenomenal from a technical standpoint. Sorry, you wanted to
Oh,
say something.
yeah. One last thing about Sleepaway Camp. The only thing that the protagonist did wrong was getting caught.
Okay.
I mean,
No,
hey, isn't everything legal until you get caught?
exactly.
Yes.
No, I mean, Friedkin's cinematography is out of this fucking world. The performances are phenomenal. I'm so thankful that Friedkin had the sense to kind of go the like Steve McQueen route with Pacino and do a more stoic, reserved performance. This film, I wouldn't be defending this film if you had fucking Al Pacino doing his like Jack and Jill fucking Nicolas Cage bullshit. Like,
Hmm.
there's something to be said for the fact that so much of Pacino's acting in this film is with his eyes. It's
Yeah.
all
True.
reserved, it's all stoic. And if you had him doing his like fucking,
Playing Twister with your sister.
Yeah.
fucking hoo ha, bullshit,
Hoo-ah.
this becomes a worse film.
True. I
Like,
mean, I do think the film does pretty well despite all the hardships that it faced. I mean, there was a lot of going back and forth in pre-production, whether that they wanted to adapt the film. I mean, Friedkin said that the novel itself wasn't that great, but he saw something in it that he wanted to do something with eventually. Um, although not initially, which I do think is interesting. And then, the biggest issues that I could point out are the audio problems, but knowing the story behind that, it makes total sense. They had takes that were completely sabotaged because uh, people against it while it was in production. So it's really
yeah.
almost amazing that the film even got made to begin with. Um,
It almost calls to mind, oh fuck, Basic Instinct. I don't know if you've ever followed the production of that, but they face similar controversy because there were people boycotting that film before it even came out because it's a bisexual woman. How can she be the villain? You know, we have to stop this film. It's wrong to even portray that in a film. So I mean, it does speak to how far we've come and maybe how far we still have to go. But I mean, I don't know. I think it's definitely of its era.
hmm. It's an interesting film to kind of go back on and just see kind of it does more or less capture the zeitgeist of the time. Um, for better or for worse. But I do think it's worth going back to and reflecting on and just seeing it as it is. And I really like how you can really feel the world, like the way it's filmed. Like you really just feel like you're there. And there is something about that immersion that is fascinating to me. Although I was really confused by elements of the plot, um, just kind of going through it. But at the end of the day, I think I could give Cruising for a Bruise 9.
Well, I'm gonna be slightly more generous. I'm a huge fucking fan of William Friedkin, and I've
Fair enough.
made that pretty well known on the show before.
What?
I know I never talk about him.
Oh,
I think I'm going to give this a solid 9. I
wow.
think it's no, I really do. I think there's something here, just the technicality, the performance. Like I think it has this. It's not perfect, but there's something there.
Indeed, there
There's
is.
something. Yeah.
I
Who's
think I'll give
here? I'm
I think
here.
I give it an 8.5. I think it would have gotten higher if they would have showed the fisting.
God damn.
That's 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 uh that's
Just
fair.
you're just an unabashed fan of that. I appreciate that.
I mean, no shame, right?
I will
It's
say this film's a whole lot better than the sequel, Cruise Control. Or no, I guess that was Speed 2.
is it a whole lot better? Is that what you said?
Sure, let's say it was.
Um, moving on, Devin, would you like to introduce this next one?
Boy, would I. So we have The Hanging Garden from Tom Fitzgerald, 1997. This is a film that I was introduced to by my old film professor. Shout out to Brian. Not gonna say your last name in case you don't want to be dodged, but hey, I hope you're listening. Um, this is a film that was introduced to me via our Canadian cinema class, and I didn't see the entirety of the film when he introduced it. He kind of goes back and forth different years. Sometimes he'll have a full film that you watch and analyze and talk about, and then sometimes he'll just show you clips of a film and he'll kind of change it up every year, as apparently, because I have friends like Daryl who took his programs in different years and he had a slightly different roster. So in my year when I did Canadian film studies, he showed us a clip of the Hanging Garden, and the way it was introduced to me was this is a scene where there are two contradicting pieces of information, and I want you to watch this film or watch this scene while keeping these two things as true happening at the same time, even though they're contradictory. Some yeah, in fact, I don't want to spoil it too much. I think you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, this is a film that I finally came back to after years, just because the metaphysical kind of way it presented story just really stuck with me. Um, and I was just I could remember like what was happening in the scene, but I couldn't remember the name of the film. And I remember messaging him years later asking about it, and told me, and I found it on YouTube. And when I watched it, I was just completely awestruck with it, even more than I remember being, just seeing that one scene out of context. So this is a film about a guy named Sweet William who returns home after living many years away, and he finds that his family home has not changed much. He comes home to go to his sister's wedding, and a lot of old family dynamics come to light. And there's this ongoing theme with flowers, where you may have noticed every single character is named after a flower.
Oh gosh,
Yeah.
yeah, you're right.
Yep,
Huh.
which
Okay.
which is pretty well foreshadowed, where his father is kind of have him remember when certain flowers come into um the very beginning, which I thought was a really beautiful opening sequence, kind of setting up the whole theme of the story to an extent. But yeah,
Definitely.
the big thing with this film is that this character is both alive and dead. The alternate title, in fact, was Schrodinger's Closet.
Oh
Oh
wow.
really? That's see, I
No,
think that's a better title.
no, actually, no, I completely made that up. But how fitting would that have been,
Yeah, no, yeah. Now I want to write that movie. That's a
right? But no, I thought it was really fascinating how this is almost kind of spoiled in the tagline. Even they did not know how to market this film. This film was this is the thing with Canadian films. There's a lot of genuinely interesting, amazing, original ideas, but because of like underfunding or just uh, indifference from like the Canadian community in general, they're just not marketed or handled well. So, and the tagline on one of the posters, not the one that I included here. Um, it basically spoiled like the main crux of the film. That the main character is both alive and dead, where you see him as a gay, teenager who's overweight, who is ashamed of who he is and what he was caught doing. That he hangs himself in the garden, um, which could be seen as a metaphor for him kind of shedding his old identity and to leave home, and he kind of comes to reconcile that. And I just love how it shows him at three different ages at the same time living in this home, and it's just one of those elements that really stuck with me. It's a really unique storytelling. It's metaphysical, but it feels very like real. Like Roger Ebert really wrote a great review talking about like when you're kind of reflecting on past versions of yourself, it's like they all exist in the same space together. And
yeah. No,
Yeah.
I will say I was kind of torn on this film because on one hand I feel like it has a lot of great ideas. I don't know that it knows exactly what to do with all of them.
I,
I will say I believe this was Tom Fitzgerald's
debut,
debut.
it is.
So I feel like judging based solely on that, I think it's really like fucking great. I mean, and it was cool. I mean, seeing Sarah Polly, a very young Sarah Polly in
Yeah,
this film,
that's how
who
you
of
know it's a
course now
Canadian
is
film. So she or fucking what's his name pops up in almost every single movie. Like the Canadian film world is such a small world. You'll just see the same people pop up in several movies. Um,
yeah, no, it was cool seeing her. I mean, now she's the Oscar nominated director and all this, but
winning.
it's yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, no, but I think it's good. I think it was sweet. It's very bittersweet, but no, I mean it's a very competently made, um, independent little art house film, and I think gosh, now if it came out today, it would be an A24 film,
Oh, absolutely.
like,
Yeah.
um,
I think you got to give it a little more credit than that. I think it's very unique kind of movie. There's so many weird things with the family dynamic of how oddly comfortable he and the sister are. Like he's helping her kind of on the toilet because she has just like really annoying dress. I like how just rash and irreverent she is about the whole thing. Um,
There's also, I mean, I will say, there's also that weird dynamic at the end where she kind of knows that her husband wants to fuck her brother, and she like
well,
there's some bizarre,
there
yeah,
is.
family dynamics there.
Yeah, it's very, yeah. I think it is semi-autobiographical. I don't know how true it is to Tom's life, but it feels very uncomfortably true for some people, like the situation that they
Yeah,
might be in.
Yeah.
no, definitely. Yeah, I think the cinematography, I think, left a little bit to be desired. I think it has that kind of like 90s look,
Well,
kind of 90s soap opera look. There's
I
some
will
moments
say
that,
the upload that we saw was 16 by 9, but I'm pretty sure it was shot in 4:3, so it's definitely cropped in from how it was actually shot. Because
okay,
here's the thing with a lot of Canadian films, especially in this era, they were basically destined to be on TV. Because there's almost no
right.
market for theater play except for like the independent theaters or people that really give a shit about Canadian films. um, American
Well,
films
see, it's
basically dominate Canadian cinemas. So when they shot these films through Telefilm Canada, it's like this is going to be on TV, so let's just shoot it 4:3. But
well,
then the,
so it's interesting you say that, because I hadn't got it out of my mouth, but I was just about to say, like, it reminds me of uh the like episodes of Twin Peaks from the 90s, the way those were shot in that kind of like soap opera kind of aesthetic, like like this is going on ABC, you know what I mean? Like, so I definitely see that. Um
it's kind of
but no,
it's factors that kind of limit it, but also because of the crapshoot that is getting anything funded in Canada, you get a lot more creative freedom, and so you get stories like this that go places that most others won't.
well, and that kind of adds to the charm of it, right?
Yeah.
Um, Man, there's so many things to talk about with this film, but I remember just watching this and I was a little high, but I was just genuinely blown away by just the unfolding of certain events. So, um, the main scene that I remember my teacher showing us was him and this other guy kind of exploring each other out in the garden, and then the grandma sees, and he's absolutely ashamed, so he hangs himself. But then he's also alive many years later, reflecting on how he had died and the new person that he become. Um, but then there's a scene where the mom is talking to a friend of hers, going through this store looking for a new Virgin Mary because the grandma accidentally broke the old one. Which the way the grandma caresses like the Virgin Mary is kind of funny. How she's like shaming them for that, but then she that to the anyway. Their eyes move, and that genuinely freaks me out. Like I was not expecting it. Like it's like a cheap
Yes.
digital effect, but I was just like, what the fuck? This is a horror movie. Um, just seeing like their eyes move a little bit just freaked me the hell out. Um, but then not as much as what the mother does in response to his son maybe being gay. Um, what did you guys think
Yo,
of?
yeah, absolutely. No, that's, I mean, Jesus Christ, I was
What did she do?
Oh, very.
What did she do, Steven?
She hires a prostitute for her son to turn him straight.
Yeah, well, no, no,
It's
it's
Jesus
she's
Christ.
not a professional prostitute. She's just a struggling mother that needs ends meet. And this is the most. There's a lot of exchanges in the writing here that are incredible.
Are you gonna talk about the line that I think you're gonna talk about? Because we were watching this. We paused the movie when she said this, and I just audibly went, "Oh my god, gross, gross."
Which
It-
which line was that, Steven?
you take care of mine,
Oh
and
yeah, it's
I'll
like
take care of yours.
I'll take care of your son. No, you take care of mine. Like yeah, it's
Ugh.
just the most awkward possible way of doing it. And I don't know. It does kind of really poke fun at the very conservative Christian backwards way of doing things. Um, Actually, I kind of made this as a joke when I first was reacting to the film in real time. But it's like there's this scene where the grandmother is giving the kids protection for when they go out to their dancing, and
Yes.
it's like I'm pretty sure I know this is like a product of its time, but I'm pretty sure it was even common knowledge then that condoms are much better protection than anal beads. Or maybe those for
Yeah.
hail, or maybe those
I
for.
think those were rosary beads,
Oh,
but what
sorry,
you
my
do with
mistake.
them,
Yes.
what you do with them in your own time, I mean,
It's in the eye of the bead holder.
Oh God.
are you proud of that one?
I'm very proud of that one.
I mean, it's
Oh,
just wow. I just find it so funny and ironic the way they
I I
yeah,
do I do just want to reiterate that line might be one of the like top 10 most horrific things I've ever heard in a movie. Uh, like there's like there's lines in fucking Irreversible and Audition that don't come close to the level of just sheer disgust that entered my body when I heard that.
there,
Um,
there's another line here that I kind of screen grabbed, and it's really just a throwaway line, but like when the mother was like talking to her son about her boyfriend, and her boyfriend's name, his boyfriend's name is Dick, and she says, "What does your dick do?"
Yes.
And then just sips her tea. I mean, I just found that hysterical.
yeah, and the sister also throws a hard F slur there at the
Oh
end,
yeah.
which I was like, what the
See,
fuck?
I can say it.
Well, we're not gonna say it because we don't want to get.
I'm choosing not to.
I mean, you
Fair
do
enough.
probably have a pass, but we're not. We're not gonna do that.
Oh yeah, I forgot
We're
to
gonna
show.
put some caution tape
It,
over my girlfriend's mouth here.
this one shot of the Hail Mary in the eyes is genuinely terrifying. Like,
No, absolutely.
holy shit.
Um,
Well, I was actually a big fan of the actor who plays Sweet William as an adult. I didn't. I just saw this movie today, but he was the guidance counselor on Todd in the Book of Pure Evil, which I
Oh,
love.
no way.
Very short lived, but very much worth viewing. Blech.
you'll get it eventually.
I'll get it
I
eventually.
have never heard of Todd in the Book of Pure Evil.
Oh, it's
I've heard
great.
of it, but I haven't seen it. But I had no idea he was also in it. It's really interesting small world when you get into like actors in Canadian films and when they get into other productions. A lot of them end up doing stuff on TV because that's the most consistent work they can normally get. Um,
Well, it's also what, God, what was the guy's name? Because we've reviewed a couple of Canadian films, and there's an actor who shows up several times, and it's always really cool to see him. And he's one of those guys that he's fucking phenomenal, and he's not as
John
what is
McKellar.
he's no fucking Elias Cotillas.
Oh yeah, he was in The Adjuster, which you hated. Um,
I hated The Adjuster, but he's also in Crash, which I loved.
true.
Uh,
Yeah,
but he's also like even in The Adjuster, he gives a really great performance, and
this
he's
is
just
true.
one of those guys that I will see pop up, and I'm like, God damn, he's fucking phenomenal in everything he's in.
I still
Not
hold by my statement that you should have perhaps you should have adjusted your expectations. Or maybe I should have adjusted your expectations with that film.
yes.
I mean, Canadian cinema is just a weird thing. I literally found my copy of it in the
Well,
dollar
you
store next to children's movies. I'm like, this is should not be in this section. I'm buying this to make sure
well,
no
I mean,
child gets
you
their hands
guys
on
are
it.
you guys are pretty weird yourselves, so I
Oh,
mean, this
absolutely.
is pretty par for the
I mean,
course.
this is why I champion the films, the few films that we make that are genuinely impressive and genuinely have something to
Because
say.
they're so few and far between. I mean, no.
That's a thing, and that's why I champion the little weird, fucked up movies that we make, just because they have a unique vision when they can get made. Um,
Yes.
it's so frustrating, but I do love the creative freedom that is allowed when you can get money to make it.
Yeah. Well, and I will say, I mean, this is, just the fact that this is a, quote unquote gay movie that was made, pre Brokeback Mountain, pre,
Yeah.
Mulholland Drive, pre when those movies really like started becoming mainstream. And this is, a weird little art house movie in the 90s. Was this I do wonder if this was pre My Own Private Idaho, because I think that was one of the
I
first.
think it's around the same time. It's 90s, right? So this came out in
Yeah.
97. My Own Private Idaho. When did that come out?
Oh gosh. I am not sure. I'll check that out.
'91. Okay, so that predates it a little bit, but it's still around
But
the same
still, I
time.
mean, this is still pretty like trailblazing. I mean, because like, I mean, with the exception of like, Midnight Cowboy. I mean, queer cinema really didn't start taking off until right around this era, and then even then, it was kind of relegated to the independent art house scene.
And
So
like,
in a way, this film is kind of a trailblazer in its own right.
and I mean, I just really connected with the film. I mean, even though I'm not gay, um, but what I love about it is just this sense of kind of being conflicted as you grow up and wanting to grow apart from kind of where you were for one reason or another, and then kind of coming
Yeah.
back to that, and just
Well,
having
I think
just having this former version of yourself kind of be hanging from a tree. Um,
yeah, no, there is some some beauty to that. I mean, just this, and I think regardless of your sexuality or identity or whatever, I think we can all relate to having really fucked up family dynamics and,
that
and
too,
messed
and
up
I
childhoods.
like that this film is not afraid to go there. Also, can we just talk about the fact that Violet, the one girl, is actually his kid?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a huge plot twist that I did not predict at all.
Yeah.
No,
She
I
took care of him a little bit too well.
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, just like the fact that his sister was taking care of. Eesh.
his daughter.
I did not know how to process that when I found that information. Just like, wow, this
Yeah.
I did not expect it to take it even further, but holy shit.
Damn.
Um,
Well, let's talk about ratings. What are
man,
we feeling with this one?
I mean, I'm gonna be bold. I'm gonna give this a 9.6. I just think it's a phenomenal, unique film that I really can't compare it to much to anything else. I can't think of anything else that it reminds me of. I just love the way it tells its story. It's very personal. And it just
Yeah.
feels like well accomplished for what it was setting out for, despite its limited
Well,
means.
I think I'm going to give it a solid 6.9.
Nice.
Give it an 8.
Okay. That's fair. That's fair.
I think I like that. I think for a first time watch, it's a lot to take in, but it's a film
I think
that
so. Yeah.
I would love to see a proper like HD restoration of this. It's unfortunately very limited, and I hate the crop factor because it wasn't
I
shot that
could
way.
see this I could see this being included in the Criterion collection
Oh,
very
100%.
easily.
It absolutely should be.
Yeah.
In my opinion, it's just
Absolutely.
it's such a unique
And
film, I
I
think.
think it's one of those that if I went and revisited it, maybe with like a proper, um, print, that might change my score a little bit. I could see this going up or down on my next viewing, but I think for now I was decently impressed with it. I enjoyed it. I think it has a lot going for it, and I'm honestly interested in looking at the rest of this director's filmography. So
Yeah, I'm
it's a
surprised
good first impression.
I haven't seen too much other work of his, and I'm surprised he hasn't talked about more. But it's a hell of a debut. I think MGM
Well,
had the distribution rights to it, but I would love to see them dig out like an original film print and give it a proper restoration.
yeah, yeah. Well, anytime that we talk about a Canadian film that isn't Cronenberg or Adam Egoyan, or Villeneuve, I guess, but I mean, that's quite a quite a day.
Indeed.
Well, moving on, would you like to introduce this one?
Sure.
Okay, so bring it on home, Sylvia. Come on.
Okay. Just a second to sit down.
Okay.
Yeah, so the next film is Breakfast on Pluto, starring Cillian Murphy. Uh got Liam Neeson in there. Gotta give credit to Liam Neeson. Okay, so yeah, it's the story of Patrick Kitten, Braden, um, a young orphan boy who you find out is actually a transgender woman, coming into herself and her story of finding the life she's always dreamed of and the trials and tribulations of being raised, I guess in a monastery, not a monastery. What's the word I'm looking for?
Like a convent almost.
Yeah, like like a Catholic school with
Very,
all
very
that.
Catholic conservative sort of.
Yeah.
So I had not heard of this film. This is apparently based on a book.
Yes, but in the book, her name instead of kitten is Pussy.
Which I think was a good choice on the filmmakers.
Yes.
One thing that I thought was very interesting about this film. So apparently this is directed by Neil Jordan
Of the Crying Game.
of The Crying Game. So if you don't know, The Crying Game does not have the best reputation as far as its handling of transness, I guess.
Yeah.
Um,
It's understatement of the year.
Sure. And I have never seen The Crying Game. I think you have.
Long ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've never seen it.
I haven't seen it yet. It's been on my list for years. I think I picked up the VHS of
And
it years
see,
ago.
I don't. And see, my thing is because we talked about this with Midnight Express and the Cable Guy, right? So is The Crying Game as bad as its reputation suggests, or is it just tone deaf, but it got a worse reputation because of Jim Carrey? Because
Go ahead.
Because Ace Ventura was kind of parodying that. We touched on that earlier, but like, so I don't really know. I've never seen The Crying Game, but this feels like what this reminds me of. When Jonathan Demme made Silence of the Lambs, there was this really big push against that film for being transphobic. I personally don't think the film is transphobic. I think it was maybe intentionally misunderstood and unfairly represented. They really do go out of their way in that film to say Buffalo Bill is not trans, that trans people are more likely to be victims than they are perpetrators of an attack.
Far more.
Right.
Far more, right. So, but because of the backlash, whether justified or not, but because of that backlash, Jonathan Demme did a film called Philadelphia.
Mm.
And it was to bring awareness to the HIV/AIDS crisis. And it was kind of a way of like reparations in a sense. And I feel like Breakfast on Pluto is Neil Jordan's Philadelphia.
But even with that scene at the end of Silence of the Lambs, excuse me, people don't remember that ending scene. They remember Buffalo Bill.
Right.
That's what stands out. That's what people remember. That's what's fresh on their minds.
No, absolutely. And I think that's why Demme felt that obligation to make Philadelphia.
Well, yeah, because The Crying Game is only remembered for the one scene whenever he finds out.
Right.
Yes, I'll leave it at that.
So I think this was, like I said, I think this was Neil Jordan's way of trying to sort of take back and in a way apologize. And no, go ahead.
Oh, no.
I was just going to say there's even a scene in here. I don't know if you caught this, but Stephen Ree, I think, am I pronouncing that correctly?
No idea.
Okay, so he was the lead of The Crying Game, and in this film, he shares a moment. He's the magician in this film, and he shares a moment with Cillian Murphy, and essentially, says that I know that you're trans, but I still love you, right?
Yeah, he already knew, and that.
Yeah. So again, I think this does come back to Neil Jordan trying to make amends in a way.
And yeah, it might not be like as good of representation as you can make it in the current year, but for 2005, there were few films that were like that.
Yeah,
And
I can't think of too many other films that really have this kind of reputation.
And I think nowadays we would have the conversation about trans people playing trans parts, right?
Yeah.
There was actually a video that I linked in the Discord from a video essayist named Lily Simpson, and she talks about how that, like, David Duchovny in Twin Peaks, how his performance in that role is actually very respectful and very well done, but the problem with this idea that, like, it's not played by a trans person.
That's just a man in costume, and that's what transness gets reduced to in a lot of people's minds, which harms us in very many ways.
Right. But I feel like those conversations weren't happening in 2005 yet.
Yeah, you didn't have trans people who were portraying trans characters.
And I feel like
Yeah.
I feel like, this film, and like, this film was even before, like, The Danish Girl and like,
Trans America.
oh gosh, what was that other one? Like Transparent with
Transparent.
Jeffrey Tambor.
Yeah.
So, like, this.
We don't talk about him apparently.
Oh,
Yeah.
did he get canceled?
He did get he got Me Too'd by a
Oh,
few people.
wow.
Quite a few people.
Okay. So yeah, I feel like this film came out at a time where I think
in
that
the cultural zeitgeist.
I think it came just at the right time where it kind of gets a pass.
Yeah.
And I think, in spite of the problem with its casting, I feel like it's done really respectfully. And I think Cillian Murphy is a good fit for the role. I really,
Yeah.
I mean, I think as good as you can possibly be.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, no, I think he's a pretty good fit for the role, especially for the time. I was trying to think of a way to weave an Oppenheimer joke in there, but it just got lost.
Well, he did look the bomb.
Yeah, there it is.
Did we? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. E for effort. I mean,
C minus.
C minus.
That's that joke crashing.
Oh,
and
that
burning.
joke really bombed.
But so I actually have a funny story about how I discovered this movie. So in 2006, I was an 8th grader, or okay, excuse me for the Canadian audience, I was grade 8. So
She's carrying on my tradition of roasting you guys. So,
well, I'm so easy to roast, so I have to, have to get a
well,
few digs in.
absolutely.
So I was with my aunt, who is literally and figuratively a Karen, and we went to a store called Big Lots, which is just like stuff that couldn't sell at other places, so it goes
Kinda
here.
like a surplus.
It's like a liquidation place, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So she was like, I'm not going to do her voice.
No, please don't.
Oh gosh. So she basically told me, hey, pre-transition Sylvia, go pick out a movie or two, because they were like $1 or $2 USD.
Wow, that's
so
big
I
money
went
here.
yes. So I go and look, and I see this, and I was like, holy fuck, I've got to watch this, because like I've known I was trans since I was 5. I just had to hide it because religious family, yada yada. Here I am. And so I found it and read the back of it, and I was like, yeah, this movie speaks to me. I've got to get it. But I sandwiched it between 2 other movies that were like macho action movies. I forget what they were.
Wow. Okay.
And so I had my backup plan in my head. So my aunt goes and looks at him. She's like, okay, wait, what's this?
Just want a Trojan horse it into the cart.
Yes. And so, I mean, the store was quite crowded, and she makes a big scene like, that's a man in a dress. What kind of movie are you watching? Are you getting funny on me? Yells it out in front of everybody. And I was like, no, Aunt Karen. You see, this is actually 2 of the actors from the new Batman movie, Batman Begins. That's the Scarecrow, and that's Ra's al Ghul. It's actually a comedy movie making fun of the people you don't like, so it's cool.
Right.
And so she was like, okay, throw it in.
Oh man.
And then she was like, I'm not going to tell your mom about it, though. She knew.
Yeah.
Well, at least she was understanding a little bit. For
That
sorry, I had to do all the like the mental gymnastics, but
oh yes.
Well, you know, it all,
She is my least accepting family member.
oh
well,
boy.
it all worked out in the end.
Did it?
Did it? um. So what did you think of this movie, Devin?
I thought it was really interesting. I mean, I just kind of watched it like the other day, so I haven't had too much time to process it. I thought it was kind of funny how having these like CG birds and they're kind of gossiping on what's going on. It's
Well,
almost
it
like
is.
she's
It
like,
is a very like we've used this word before tonight, but it is campy, isn't it?
Oh,
I mean,
it,
there's
it,
absolutely.
so many.
Well, I
it,
mean, the scene alone where Killian Murphy, excuse me, Kitten, is going through and the spandex leather cat suit,
And knocking out
knocking
men
out all
with
these IRA guards with perfume, Coco
mhm.
Chanel perfume. Yeah, so camp.
well, I
No,
think they're
I did start laughing at that scene. It's just like
are they
definitely,
IRA or are they English?
They were IRA.
Oh, really?
but
Okay.
Yeah,
I,
she was
I,
upset at the IRA for killing
Oh,
the
okay.
I do think this film
stately.
does a really interesting job kind of balancing that ridiculous kind of campness of her just kind of having fun being who she is, uh, versus the very
Uh,
serious things that are going on, like all the car bombings.
yeah, like the war of the background and how she gets thrust into that.
Yeah.
It did remind me a little bit of this other Canadian film that I felt a little remiss we didn't do, but I think it would be worth discussing later on. It's very similar kind of coming of age story and it's coming out of the closet kind of thing. Film called Crazy, which I think Aaron proposed for a different trilogy, so we'll have to talk about that. So it did remind me a bit of that film. Um, but yeah,
Yeah, definitely.
I did think it had a lot of fun moments and it was really interesting. It wasn't speaking to me necessarily, but I do think I could tell that Cillian fun in the role, and it
Well,
is interesting
he
just
did
kind of.
say that he took the role very seriously.
Yeah,
Apparently, like he actually like talked to uh drag queens and trans people
yeah,
and like
to get the body motion and the voice down and
supposedly he
It's
I
such a weird contrast. Like I remember watching this and it was recommending I was looking to look at Peaky Blinders immediately after, and just the complete contrast of his personality between those two roles. It's
well,
incredible.
he did say one thing that I thought was fascinating, that when he approached the role, he wanted the character to be feminine but not effeminate, which I thought was a fascinating way of
yeah,
looking at it. And it really just goes to show that he really did approach this
yeah,
with a very serious mindset, which I think is admirable in its own right.
yeah,
Yeah, because I think there's a way to do this movie where you lean a little bit too much into the camp of it, and I think that wouldn't work. I think striking that balance is what makes this film work.
absolutely.
And I think everybody involved really treated this as seriously as possible, and I think it benefits from that. I think it's well shot. I think the performances are tight. I mean, it's again, I'm kind of like you, Devin. It didn't speak to me personally, but it did look like it was made by people who treated it with reverence and who were having a good time.
It spoke to me personally.
Oh yes,
Oh,
well
that's good, and
Yes.
definitely
I
tell.
think that story of how you were sneaking it into the cart, because you resonate almost immediately with what you read on there. It's very endearing,
Oh,
and it does show that this film does speak to people. So I think that's awesome.
yeah.
Um,
And I think it's important that these films exist,
mm,
right? Because it speaks to people like Sylvia,
I,
Yeah.
right? So that they don't feel
something that I thought was really well done, was the turnaround with Liam Neeson's character, and I love the parallel of how Cillian Murphy, Kitten, first approaches him in the confessional booth, to try to
Yeah.
reconnect with him, and he storms off. And then many years later, he does the same thing when she's in this what do you
Peep
call that
show.
place? I was gonna say whorehouse, but no, I think Peep Show is correct.
Yeah. Peep
Um,
show.
but
Yeah.
no, it's almost like the inverse like,
Yeah. Like
interaction,
she's in her
and
confessional booth.
I thought that was a beautiful setup and payoff of that character, and I love seeing how he was just very accepting of her afterward. They just kind of they they didn't change each other. They just learned how to get along and be themselves with each other. And that's a beautiful message, right?
Yeah, it is. It does have a beautiful sentiment at its core.
Yeah.
It
And
reminded
I
me
was a
very
big
much of Paris, Texas. That whole Peep Show scene. But
I have not seen that film, and I've had it on my list forever. I'm a huge fan of Harry Dean Stanton.
that's
Uh,
something we definitely have to. I haven't seen
oh,
it in ages, but
absolutely.
it's something else.
What would you recommend it with?
Ooh,
What kind of films?
that's a good question. I mean, so we have. I'm not gonna spoil the announcement too much, but there's a lots of like lingering shots with him like not talking and very explorative. There's a lot of landscapes,
Okay.
so it's that kind of vibe. So I'd pick some other films of that kind of vein where you just have it kind of drags out its story a little bit, but then it pays off in a spectacular way. Um,
Okay.
so
Okay.
I can't think of
Well,
any others off the top of my head that would fit the bill, but I'm sure we can find something.
yeah.
well, I was also I loved the role of the rock star in the film, Billy Hatchett, who was played by Gavin Friday, the lead singer of the band Virgin Prunes, who big fan of because of this movie.
Right on.
Yeah, it's the whole glam rock
Yeah.
band
Yeah.
was kind of fun, and I actually read that that's in the book he's a politician, but they made the decision to make him this kind of like over the top glam rocker, and I think the film is better because of it.
Yeah,
Oh
some of
yeah.
the best scenes in the movie feature him.
Oh, and also Brendan Gleeson's in it. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
And Brendan Gleeson created that entire dance that he does as the big
Yes.
character, which I think
Really,
is fucking phenomenal. What a Chad
right?
to show up to this fucking set and just own it as a giant ass mole. What is the thing?
Yeah, I think it was a mole.
Oh my god.
Yeah, but basically they're in mascot suits.
I fucking love that.
I was actually the mascot whenever I was in middle school.
So this
Wow.
resonated even more than just
Oh
the
yeah.
okay. Um
But the scene whenever Kitten throws the rock star's guns in the lake and then he finds out whenever they're going to go do a strike. Oh my gosh, that was poignant.
Oh yeah. I mean,
well, it does.
the only thing I thought in that scene is why didn't he just fucking kill her? I mean,
Yeah. I thought he was going to as well or something. Beat her, but no, he was just like, yeah.
he's
Yeah.
just like I'm in deep shit kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other people were a little more rough, and she was kind of being a little airy, I guess, in defense. Um,
Well, I think it's also interesting that this film is very like it's campy and it's over the top, but there's also this really sweet tenderness to it.
Yeah.
And
there
I
is.
think that that was something that was also changed from the book because in the book, um, Kitten, who again is pussy in the book,
Yeah.
she has these over the top sexual kinky sort of exploits with men and women, and in the movie, I mean, it's very like they don't even really kiss that much in the movie. I don't
No,
think
she doesn't kiss anybody in the movie.
it's all implied, and I
Yeah.
think that's a smart decision.
Because
Interesting.
the character in the movie definitely got down.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely no, but I'm just saying I think
Yeah.
it was a smart decision to play it with that sort of understated
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
tenderness.
because then it's not like a lurid fascination. It's just sort of experiencing the eyes of a character without being too like any other protagonist. So I do think that that was a smart move. And yeah, I agree that this film has a lot of heart to it. And I forgot to mention that with The Hanging Garden, that I think that film is absolutely filled with heart. And one
Yeah.
point that I might have for Cruising is well, you just don't get a lot of that sense of tenderness or heart. You have little scenes of it here and there, but it's definitely like a more of a cool kind of arm's length um, look at it, where these films are right in the heart of it, I think, comparatively.
And I think that's a fair criticism. I mean, I'm obviously a fan of Friedkin. I'm a fan of this kind of like police procedural kind of elevated, crime movie in a
I
sense.
thought they were gonna say elevated
So
horror for a second, and I was gonna laugh.
Oh God.
no,
The
um,
hypocrisy.
yes. So I think my interpretation of Cruising might be a little biased because it has a lot of elements that I really like. Um,
Same, but different.
Same but
Yeah.
different. No, but so Sylvia wanted to say something about Breakfast on Pluto really quickly.
Oh yeah, no, I love the final scene where she finally, well, she meets her mother, and then she meets her mother again at the very end, and she says like, "Tell your who she's pregnant," and she says, "Tell your mother I hope it's a girl this time." That was beautiful.
That is. I love that. It's very sweet.
Yeah,
And I think that does speak to just the overall, like we were talking about, that love at its core.
yeah, and that she didn't need her mother to know
Yeah,
that
that
like,
she
hey,
had kind of,
I'm actually your kid who you abandoned.
but she had come into her own person.
She did.
Yeah, and I think that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Huh.
Well, what do we get to ratings? I mean, I feel like we could gush about all of these films all night, but what are we thinking?
I could give it a solid 6.9, but I did that joke already. I'll bump that up to a 7.5. I do think it's a very solid kind of page film. Didn't speak to me personally, but I think for the people that speaks a lot to, happy for them that they have this.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a solid 8. Uh, I'm kind of with you. While it didn't speak to me personally, I do know someone who it spoke to very deeply, and I think it's
In the biblical sense.
oh oh boy, but it's a sweet, beautifully made film, and I think it's incredibly respectful, and I think it's funny that we can say that about a film directed by the same guy who made The Crying Game.
Yeah.
Sylvia, what would you give this?
I give it a 9.25. Like, it's not perfect. There's a couple things here and there that are kind of like groany. That are like, I could do without that. But at the end of the day, it spoke to me. It helped me find myself.
And that's what it's all about,
That's
right?
that's the power of cinema.
It is.
It
That's the
is.
power of love. Anyway,
Very me movie.
Literally you.
Yeah, one of my literally me's.
you have your own. I think everyone should have their own literally me movies.
Well, I
Yeah.
just within the last few months, I showed Sylvia Drive,
Yeah.
and I showed her True Romance. So
Yeah.
I
Ju-
really told on myself.
just catching her up on your back catalog of movies that you started.
Yeah, that I started. Yeah.
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 Um. Well, with that in mind, this has been a fantastic, very gay episode.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Thank you for having me, Sylvia. Thank you for coming on board.
Thank you. Thank you.
We
Wait, who's bored?
uh good night, everybody. No, really quickly before we sign off, let's plug next month. Next month, Daryl Ailes, who unfortunately couldn't be here tonight. He's got a super hard workload, been crazy busy with stuff we can't talk about, and some other work related stuff, not related to that stuff. But next month is his birthday. So we're doing a birthday episode. As you know, we did this back in February for me, where we reviewed The Conformist and Buffalo 66 and Mike Lee's Naked. This is Daryl's birthday month. This is his pick. We're going to be looking at silent leads. So these are protagonists who don't have much to say at all, or do they? So we're going to be looking at
They
a
do
ghost story.
they do a lot of
Sorry.
speaking other than with words.
Exactly. And a movie is a picture is worth 1,000 words or something like that. So we're going to be talking about a ghost story. We're going to be talking about Nicholas Winding Refn's Only God Forgives. And we're going to be looking at a Western film from Sergio Corbucci. This is one of Tarantino's favorites, from the same man behind the original Django, who not Django Unchained, but the original Django. We're going to be looking at The Great Silence
Oh
from
yes.
Sergio Corbucci. So come on down next month. We're going to talk about these movies and shut the fuck up.
We're gonna yeah. It'll just be a silent podcast while we quietly search for Sergio's Corbucci. Anyway,
Oh,
the Killian Murphy was
yeah.
this one. So
and there will be no shortage of terrible jokes on my end as usual. Thank you guys for being on here tonight. Really appreciate it. I'm glad that more people are seeing these types of films, and hopefully we shed a bit of light on some films that really go under the radar. Um,
Sylvia?
Yeah, well, thank you all for having me on, and I'm gonna go back into the closet for another year. See you all next June, and happy Pride, everybody.
uh, yeah.
Yeah,
it's
well
unfortunate we couldn't get this
after
episode done before the summer solstice, because that was the whole meaning of the title. Pride goeth before the
Yeah,
well
summer.
yeah, after Transgender Day of Visibility, she just goes invisible. I
Yeah.
can't see her
There you go.
anymore.
one day of the year.
You go from trans woman to translucent.
Yes.
Ah,
Out of sight, but never out of mind.
no, you would never do that. Too loud and insufferable.
Yeah, but you
Two.
love me.
I do love
do.
you.
Mwah.
All right. Good night, everybody.
That's so sweet. I'm gonna throw up. Good night, guys.
Bye.
Good night.